Okay, so my current living situation that I am in, I'm not allowed to change the AC and furnace heating system, that kind of thing. So I know I look really sweaty, but I'm using my best form of denial to tell myself that the heat's not on right now. So if I look a little sweaty for the next couple of episodes, I do apologize, but it's just almost 75 degrees outside and the heat's still on, which we're gonna pretend is a good thing. Alright, without further ado, here's chapter 12 of The Night Singer. 12. Hannah let Eric drive when they left Guard B. She felt drained after their their meeting with Rebecca. Despite having been told to leave, she had stayed with her until the forensic technicians arrived. 20 or so difficult, silent minutes. Rebecca had said she was fine with the technicians searching the house, but whether she really meant it was a different matter entirely, and they couldn't risk having her go through Joel's room, hiding things because she thought they weren't relevant to the investigation. Hannah understood the impulse all too well. How many times had she rummaged through her own house after her father was taken into custody, searching for evidence that he was the monster they claimed, even though she knew that police had already seized it all. She was 19 again, watching the officers lead her father away. That moment was the turning point, and she hadn't been able to cope. She had run off to Rebecca's, and when she had got home a few hours later, the police were carrying out a search of the house. One of the officers had given her a ride over to her grandmother's, and through the car window she had seen the neighbors watching. Standing in groups along the edge of the road, heads huddled together. Christopher hadn't been home at the time. He had stayed away for several days. The officers had even searched her room. They hadn't closed the drawer in her desk properly. "What made you leave Oland?" Eric asked, dragging her back to the present. "Are you always this nosy?" Hannah countered. He laughed, but didn't repeat the question. Couldn't he see that she really didn't want to talk about it? Or was he simply trying to provoke a reaction? This time Eric managed to keep quiet for almost a minute. Hannah had been counting the seconds. "Do you really think you should be there when we interview Axel Stanston?" There was the question she had been waiting for. "I haven't seen him in 16 years, and I never really knew him." Eric let that question lie, too. "Do people lock their doors in Guard B?" he asked instead. "We almost never did, but that's probably all changed now. I know I lock mine in any case, even though I live on the outskirts of a place that's even smaller than Guard B." The road beneath the car rose up away from the ground and continued across the Kalmar Strait. Hannah always felt a kind of sadness when she left the island now, every single time, even if it was only for a few hours. Hannah doubted Ingrid locked her doors. It had nothing to do with the size of the village or even the idea that times had changed. The fact was that she was more terrified now, and it didn't add up. What did she have left to lose? Axel Sandston's office was on Larmagaten, close to the old water tower. The tower was full of apartments now, or it had been 16 years ago at the very least. Hannah still hadn't managed to come to grips with everything that had changed since she'd left. The old water tower was yet another place where she had partied as a teen. During her first year of high school, she had been in a brief relationship with a guitar player whose half-sister had an apartment on one of the middle floors. When she looked back on them now, her school days sometimes felt like one long party. Why had she done that? She had never really enjoyed it. Even when she was drunk, she had often felt the fear of getting stuck, of becoming like her father. It was probably simply a way of trying to be someone else. Rebecca's shadow. That was what people had called Hannah, despite her being almost 20 centimeters taller. Or maybe that was precisely why. She was the gloomy extension of Rebecca, the one who never spoke. Rebecca had always found it so easy to talk to people. She was almost always happy, and it felt so good to cling to her. Being Rebecca's shadow had sometimes bothered Hannah, but when she suddenly became Lars Dunker's daughter instead, she had found herself longing for that period of anonymity. There was a playground next to the old water tower now, with rubber flooring and an enormous climbing net. Eric found a parking space to one side of it, and the children's voices followed them across the street to the main door, where an enormous brass sign read Sandston Consulting. Axel always did have a delusion of grandeur. They showed their ID in reception and asked to speak to Axel Sandston. "He's in a meeting right now," the receptionist told them. She was wearing a snug black shirt and a white skirt and a black She was wearing a snug black skirt and a white blouse and didn't look a day over 20. The heat is affecting my brain. "We really need to talk to him now," said Eric. Ordinarily, showing police ID was more than enough, but the woman still seemed to be hesitating. Eventually, she got up. Hannah peered around the room. Aside from the reception desk, there were 2 austere armchairs and a small table. The empty spaces were probably meant to make the space feel bigger than it was. The dominant color was black. A few minutes later, the woman returned. "He wants to know what it's regarding." The red stress spots on her throat seemed to be pulsing. "I'm afraid we can't share that information," said Eric. "Just go and get him," Hannah told her. "That way we won't have to interrupt his meeting and show our ID in there." The minute the woman disappeared for the second time, Eric turned to Hannah. "You really don't like him, do you?" She shook her head. Axel had always been a bastard, picking on their most insecure classmates, acting like he was better than everyone else, using Christopher for all kinds of dirty jobs. Still, all that paled in comparison to what he had subjected Rebecca to. It was incredible that more people didn't see straight through him. A door opened and closed, and Axel Sandstone came striding toward them, closely followed by the receptionist. "Sorry you had to wait," he said. "Is there somewhere more private we can talk?" asked Eric. Axel led them to a small meeting room, the door barely visible against the wall. There was an oval table inside, surrounded by 6 chairs and paintings of local landmarks on the walls, the castle, the cathedral, and the old water tower. It felt cheap compared to the rest of the office. "What is this about?" Axel asked once they were sitting down. Eric fixed his eyes on him, a calm and steady gaze. I'm sorry to tell you that your son Joel was found dead earlier today." Axel closed his eyes for a minute, then quickly opened them again. He looked away. "Did he kill himself?" "What makes you ask that?" Eric wanted to know. "He wasn't doing too well. He was struggling." "In what sense?" "His mother was very controlling," Axel explained. "To be honest, I don't think she's doing too well herself." Hannah had to dig her nails into her thighs to stop herself from shouting at him, but there was no hiding her reaction. Maybe it wasn't such a good idea for her to be here after all. "Sorry," said Axel. "I don't mean to put the blame on her. I'm in shock. Things are pretty stressful right now, and I've barely slept. I was in the middle of trying to solve a crisis when you showed up, and now this." Eric gave him a sympathetic smile. "We understand you and Joel didn't have much contact." "Sadly not," said Axel. "His mother did her best to keep him away from me." Hannah knew she shouldn't, but she couldn't help herself. "Maybe that's because you beat her." Axel turned to look at her, studying her without a word. "You look familiar." "I should. We were in the same class in high school." He still didn't seem to have worked out who she was, though perhaps he was just pretending in an attempt to throw her off balance. Considering her impressive height, she couldn't be hard to recognize. "My surname is Dunker, if that helps." "Oh, shit." An amused smile. The difference between how he and Rebecca had reacted to the news of their son's death was striking. "How's your brother?" he asked. Hannah was sick of everyone asking about her brother, though at least no one had asked about Lars. "Where were you that night?" Axel turned to Eric. "What do you want to know?" "We think Joel was killed." With a sigh, Axel reached for the jug of water in the middle of the table. He filled a glass and took a couple of sips. "I was here, working. Didn't leave until 2 a.m. Bit of a crisis, like I said." "Alone?" "Tatjana was with me until 11, but then she had to leave. She had a babysitter." "Who's Tatjana?" "An employee." Axel fixed his eyes on Hannah as he spoke, as though he wanted her to challenge him.